I never imagined the world could shift so violently in a single moment. One call, one look, one heartbeat away from everything I thought I knew. I was sitting there in the fading orange of the sunset, my hands gripping the edge of the rest stop bench like it could anchor me to reality. And then I saw him, not coming back to me, not looking for me, but leaving with her. It wasn't just the act itself that cut through me. It was the casual way he stepped into someone else's life, while mine seemed to collapse silently around me. I had trusted him with the quiet parts of myself, the parts one never spoke aloud, the ones I thought he understood because he said he did. Every word he ever spoke now felt like sand slipping through my fingers, and all I could do was watch the illusion crumble. I remember my chest tightening, a sudden storm of disbelief and nausea that made the air too sharp to breathe. How could I have been so blind? How could every laugh, every whispered promise, every small touch mean nothing in the face of this? And in that hollow silence, I realized the truth. I had been loving a shadow, a version of him I wanted to exist more than the man who stood before me. My mind raced through the memories, dissecting them, trying to find some sign, some warning I had ignored. But there was nothing, just a quiet, relentless betrayal that left me staggering in a world that suddenly felt colder than I ever remembered. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was the unraveling of certainty. My vision of my life, the one I had built around him, collapsed. And in the rubble of that collapse, I found my friend's face, loyal, steady, unwilling to look away. She didn't speak at first, because nothing she could say would undo the rawness of that moment. But her presence mattered. It anchored me when I felt weightless. She didn't tell me what to do, didn't offer hollow platitudes. She just sat there, letting me fall apart in my own time, letting me cry until I felt the first flickers of understanding. That pain, as sharp and blinding as it was, didn't mean I was weak. It meant I had been whole enough to trust, brave enough to love. And even if that love had been stolen, it hadn't been a lie. It had been real, and that reality was mine to own, not his to erase. In the hours that followed, I wandered through the streets as if I could escape the echo of what I had lost, only to realize I couldn't outrun myself. My anger rose in waves, not the petty kind that lashes out, but the deep, seismic kind that reshapes the ground beneath your feet. I wanted to scream, to break something, to feel some tangible proof that I could still command my own life. And slowly, the anger morphed into clarity. This wasn't the end of me. It was the unveiling of who I had ignored in myself while I was busy believing in someone else. I had invested so much in a future that wasn't mine, and in losing it, I was finally free to discover the life that truly belonged to me. By the time the night crept in heavy and quiet, I understood something terrifying and beautiful at once. Betrayal leaves scars, yes, but it also leaves vision. I could see myself in a way I never had before, stripped of illusions, raw in the honesty of my own heart. He had taken his part of my world, but he couldn't touch the part that was mine alone, the part that would rise, no matter how battered. And in that realization, I felt the first pulse of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Unshakable, relentless resolve. I would remember him, yes. I would remember the betrayal. But I would not be defined by it. I would rebuild from it, piece by piece, like fire forging steel, like the storm shaping the land. And in that storm, I found my beginning. Because the truth is, what he stole from me was never the whole story. The story that matters, the one that I get to write, is mine. And it begins right here in the wreckage, with the first breath of freedom that tastes like both pain and promise. I can't stop seeing it. Every moment, every word, every laugh, all replaying in a loop that refuses to let me breathe. It's like standing in front of a broken mirror, fragments cutting into my chest with every reflection. I go over it endlessly, trying to pinpoint the moment it all went wrong, searching for a clue in my own actions, in his smile, in the spaces between us where I thought love lived. But the truth is cruel. There is no single moment, no single mistake. There is only the emptiness he left behind, echoing in a place I didn't know existed inside me until it screamed awake. Anger hits first, a storm that tastes bitter in my mouth. How could someone I trusted, someone I believed in with every part of me, walk away so casually, as if my heart were nothing more than a stepping stone? I rage against him, against myself, against the fragile illusion of trust one had carried like a sacred weight. And then comes the sadness, slow and suffocating, wrapping around me like a thick fog I can't escape. It's in the quiet moments, the late nights, the empty rooms, where the silence is louder than any word he ever spoke. I feel small, diminished, like all the light inside me has been siphoned off, leaving only shadows to keep me company. I scroll through my phone, and there it is, his life displayed like a trophy. Smiling faces, perfect days, a curated happiness that feels designed to mock me. Each image fuels the fire inside me, a mix of rage and disbelief, so sharp I want to scream at the screen, to shatter it, to erase this vision of a life that once included me. It isn't just jealousy. It's a demand for acknowledgement, a refusal to vanish quietly while he moves on without consequence. But beneath that anger, something deeper stirs, a recognition that my obsession with his image, his choices, is only prolonging my pain. And so, I seek guidance, someone outside the storm, someone who doesn't flinch at my shattered state. My coworker, the one who has seen more of life's brutality than I ever imagined, listens without judgment. They don't tell me to forget, don't offer empty solace. Instead, they ask questions that force me to face the raw edges of my own mind. What do you want, they say, and I realize I don't have an answer. Do I want revenge? To make him see the destruction he left behind? Do I want closure, some acknowledgement that I mattered? Or do I want peace, the kind that feels impossible when my heart is still bleeding? I stare at myself in the mirror that night, really stare. The reflection is fragmented, a collage of fear, sorrow, and anger. But there's something there I hadn't seen before, a flicker of something untouchable. The part of me that remains intact despite everything. And for the first time, I admit it. I cannot live as a victim. I cannot let his choices dictate the shape of my life. I won't let the perfection he projects online dictate the story of my own worth. The anger and hurt are mine, yes, but so is the power to shape what comes next. The fire inside me begins to shift. The desire for revenge simmers, but it becomes something else, clarity. Not about him, but about me. About the life I want, the boundaries I refuse to cross again, the strength I am ready to claim. The sadness softens, just enough to let me see that it's a bridge, not a cage. I start to realize that the reflection I've been examining so obsessively, the one filled with pain and mistakes, isn't the whole picture. It's only part of me. There's a version of myself that can rise from this, more aware, more deliberate, more fearless. I catch myself imagining what it would feel like to move past the obsession, to let go of the need for answers that may never come. Not to forgive him, not to erase him, but to reclaim my life from the shadow of his choices. It is terrifying because it means stepping into uncertainty alone, but it is also exhilarating. For the first time in days, I feel the possibility of control over my own narrative. Not revenge, not closure, not even peace alone, something bigger. A reclamation of self, a refusal to be defined by what was taken, and a commitment to the life that still waits for me, waiting for the courage I'm finally beginning to find. And in that stillness, I understand the most brutal, beautiful truth. Heartbreak is not a sentence. It is a lens. It shows you the fractures in your world and in yourself. Yes, but it also shows the places where you can rebuild. I can be angry. I can be hurt. But I can also be relentless, unyielding, and awake. The reflection in the shattered glass isn't just broken. It's waiting. Waiting for me to choose who I will become when the pieces are finally put together again. Something inside you changes when pain stops screaming and starts whispering. That's where I am now. The chaos has quieted just enough for my mind to sharpen. I'm no longer drowning in what he did. I'm studying it. Studying him. I watch patterns I once ignored, habits I excused, cracks I didn't want to see when love blurred my vision. This isn't rage anymore. It's focus, and that terrifies me almost as much as it empowers me. I don't move fast. I don't lash out. I observe. I listen. I remember things he trusted me with, details he never thought would matter, stories he assumed were buried and safe. I see how carefully he has built his image, how much effort goes into looking untouchable. And I realize something that makes my stomach tighten. Every perfect surface hides pressure points. He isn't invincible. He just hasn't been challenged by someone who knows him the way I do. There's a strange calm in this phase. Planning gives structure to the pain. It makes the sleepless nights feel purposeful. I replay conversations not to torture myself, but to extract information. I notice who stands close to him now, who believes his version of events without question. One of them, his ally, doesn't even realize how useful they are. They talk too freely, repeat things they shouldn't, laugh while handing me threads that lead straight into his carefully guarded life. I don't manipulate them aggressively. I let them reveal themselves. People always do, but every time I consider pulling one of those threads, something inside me hesitates. A quieter voice asks what this will cost me. Not in me, because I know once I cross certain lines, I won't be able to uncross them. Justice and revenge look similar from a distance, but up close, they demand very different prices. And I'm standing right between them, unsure which direction I'm truly facing. A friend notices the shift in me before I admit it myself. They hear it in my voice, see it in the way my eyes narrow when his name comes up. They don't accuse me outright. They question, carefully. They ask what I'm really hoping to gain, and whether any of this will actually heal the wound or just keep it open longer. Their concern irritates me more than his betrayal ever did, because part of me knows they're not wrong. Still, I can't ignore the pull, the idea of balance, of consequences. He walked away clean while I was left rebuilding myself from ground up. That doesn't feel like fairness, and fairness matters to me more than I ever realized. I don't want him destroyed. I want him exposed. I want the world to see the fractures behind the smile, the selfishness behind the charm. I want the truth to breathe where lies have been thriving. At night, when everything is quiet, I argue with myself. I tell myself this is about reclaiming power, not cruelty. I tell myself I'm not hurting anyone. I'm just letting reality surface. But doubt lingers, because power gained through someone else's downfall has a way of poisoning the hand that holds it. I don't want to become someone I don't recognize just to prove I was wronged. And yet, doing nothing feels like surrender, like agreeing that what he did was acceptable, that I should simply absorb the damage and move on quietly while he thrives. That idea burns more than any revenge fantasy ever could. So I walk a careful line, each step measured, each thought interrogated. I test myself as much as I test him. What I'm really confronting isn't him. It's the part of me capable of precision, of patience, of calculated restraint. I didn't know this side of me existed. The woman who can plan instead of plead, who can wait instead of beg, who understands that silence, when used deliberately, can be louder than confrontation. This version of me is dangerous, not because she wants destruction, but because she refuses to be powerless again. I haven't acted yet. Not fully. These are still seeds. Thoughts. Possibilities. But seeds grow whether you water them or not. And I know a moment is coming when I'll have to choose what kind of garden I'm willing to live with afterward. Because revenge promises relief, but it never guarantees peace. And justice feels righteous, but only if it doesn't cost me my integrity. I'm standing at the edge of that decision now, aware that whatever I choose will shape who I become next. This isn't about him anymore. It's about whether I can carry my pain without turning it into a weapon, or whether I'm willing to wield it, knowing exactly what that makes me. I never imagined facing him would feel like stepping into fire, and yet that's exactly what it was. The first words left my lips before I even realized I was speaking. Sharp, measured, controlled, because this time I wasn't the woman gasping for air as his betrayal landed. I was someone else now, someone who had rehearsed the moment in my mind 1,000 times, and yet nothing could prepare me for the raw, suffocating heat of it. He looked at me with that same familiar charm, the smile I once trusted like armor. But this time, I saw it for what it was, a mask stretched too thin, trembling under the weight of its own lies. He thought I'd crumble. He thought I'd beg, plead, fall back into the pattern he was so accustomed to. But I didn't. I didn't falter. My voice cut through the space between us, steady and unwavering, a contrast to the storm churning in my chest. And then she was there, his lover, smug, arrogant, as if she had already won. She didn't understand, of course, that she was stepping into a world she didn't control, that her presence would only expose the cracks he had worked so hard to hide. I watched her posture, the way she spoke, the confidence that was fragile beneath the surface. I realized in that moment how little she knew of the real man she thought she possessed. Witnesses appeared almost without warning. People I didn't know, people whose presence I hadn't anticipated, but whose eyes bore into the scene like silent judges. Their attention made everything sharper, louder, impossible to hide. And suddenly, the confrontation wasn't just ours. It was public, and that made his reaction less controlled, more human, more dangerous. The words I chose were precise, not cruel, not desperate. I wasn't trying to wound. I was revealing, exposing. Each revelation landed with a weight that made him stumble, a hesitation I had never seen before. And then came the twists I hadn't even expected, the lies he had told, the manipulations that extended farther than I imagined. My mind raced, connecting the dots, realizing the betrayal was deeper, more intricate, and far more public than I had ever feared. Anger surged, not the frantic kind that clouds thought, but a focused, burning intensity that sharpened my senses. Every emotion I had swallowed, every night spent turning over what happened, crystallized into clarity. I could see him for exactly who he was, without the filters I had imposed out of love. He was selfish. He was cunning. He was careless with the lives of those who trusted him. And this time, I wasn't just hurt. I was awake. The lover tried to intervene, to defend, to protect the fragile image he had built. She didn't know she was only highlighting the fractures, that her own arrogance was making the truth undeniable. I didn't need to attack her. I didn't need to fight. I simply let the reality hang between us like smoke. Let the witnesses witness. Let the truth speak louder than any threat. And in that silence, the chaos he had hidden behind smiles and deception unraveled in real time. Somewhere in the middle of it all, I felt a shift, a weight lifting, not because I had triumphed, not because he had stumbled, but because I had reclaimed a part of myself I didn't know I had lost. My anger had a purpose now. My voice had power. My presence was undeniable. I was no longer just the person he left behind. I was the force that made him reconsider everything he thought he controlled. And yet, amidst the revelations, amidst the witnessing eyes, there was something more profound, a clarity that hadn't existed before. The betrayal, public and personal, was devastating, but was also illuminating. I could see who had believed me, who had doubted me, and who had been blinded by his charm. I could see my own strength in its rawest form, forged not by revenge or strategy, but by survival, by refusing to be diminished, by stepping into the chaos instead of fleeing from it. When the confrontation ended, it wasn't with a scream or a collapse. It ended with him retreating, his mask shattered, and me standing in the middle of a crowd that had seen the truth. The chaos lingered like smoke, sharp and intoxicating, but within it, I felt a pulse of something steady and relentless, clarity, the kind that doesn't come from planning or imagining. It comes from facing the fire and realizing you are unburnable. And that night, as the echoes of confrontation faded into memory, I understood the final lesson the betrayal could teach me. Strength isn't born from avoiding pain, and clarity isn't born from ignorance. They are born in the eye of the storm, when every lie is revealed, every pretense falls away, and you realize that no one can define the limits of your resilience but yourself. I had faced him. I had faced the chaos. And in that confrontation, I had found a truth more powerful than any betrayal. I am still standing, unbroken, and more awake than ever. The world has a way of testing you when you least expect it. Just as I thought I could measure my strength, the ground beneath me shifted again. A call from home, a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. My sibling, someone I'd always relied on for understanding, now questioning me, accusing me, misunderstanding every choice I had made since the betrayal began. And suddenly, it wasn't just him anymore. The chaos had crept into my own life, spilling over the fragile control I thought I had regained. I remember the sting of their words, sharp and unfiltered, cutting through the armor I had built. How could they not see? How could they mistake caution, calculation, and survival for malice or obsession? The betrayal I had lived through once seemed trivial compared to this, being misjudged by someone whose opinion mattered more than anyone's. I felt my chest tighten, the pulse in my temples pounding, a storm gathering behind my eyes. The weight of their disappointment, combined with the lingering anger and exhaustion from everything I had endured, made me wonder if I was reaching a limit I couldn't recover from. And yet, in the midst of that suffocating tension, there was an ally, a friend, steady and unwavering, who didn't lecture or judge. They didn't try to fix what had been broken. They simply offered presence, a space where I could let the rawness of my emotions exist without shame. They asked me questions that forced me to look inward, not outward. "What are you really fighting for?" they said. And for the first time in days, maybe weeks, I had to admit I didn't know. Revenge? Justice? Closure? Or simply the hope that someone, anyone, would understand me without needing explanation. I wandered through the apartment, tracing the edges of walls I had grown used to, feeling the emptiness in places I thought were familiar. Every sound seemed louder, sharper. The memory of his betrayal flashed in my mind, the confrontation, the public exposure, the lies unraveling. And alongside it, the misunderstanding at home. It all collided into a storm that left me raw and trembling. I questioned everything, the plans I had made, the moments I had rehearsed, the careful steps I had taken to reclaim my power. Was it worth it? Was I hurting more than I was healing? The anger I had cultivated for so long, the weapon I thought would protect me, felt suddenly fragile. I realized revenge, even in its most calculated form, couldn't shield me from the pain that was real, that was mine to face. And self-preservation, even when it had kept me alive, felt like a lonely fortress I was no longer sure I wanted to inhabit. I was standing at crossroads I had never anticipated. One path marked by retaliation, one marked by retreat, and neither offering the comfort I craved. It was the quiet presence of my ally that shifted something in me. Not words, not advice, just presence. They reminded me that growth isn't linear, that pain isn't a failure, and that resilience isn't about winning every battle, but about surviving the ones that matter. They didn't tell me what to do, but they held space for me to ask the questions I had avoided, the ones I was too afraid to face. What do I want if all of the lies, all of the chaos, all of the betrayal is stripped away? What do I want for myself, not for anyone else? And slowly, painfully, the answers began to emerge. I realized that the breaking point isn't where you fall. It's where you stop running from the storm long enough to see it clearly, to feel it without flinching, to recognize that strength is forged in moments like this. My anger could still exist, but it didn't have to define me. My desire for revenge could still burn, but it didn't have to consume me. And the misunderstanding, the loss, the betrayal, they weren't indictments of my worth. They were catalysts, forcing me to confront parts of myself I had neglected while chasing the illusion of control over everyone else. By the time night fell, exhaustion settled over me, heavy but honest. I had cried, shouted, paced, and thought until my mind was raw. And yet, in that rawness, I felt a fragile kind of peace. Not closure, not triumph, but clarity. I could choose the next steps without the blinding fire of hurt dictating every action. I could respond from a place of awareness, not reaction. I could honor my pain without letting it consume me. And in that, I felt the first spark of resilience I hadn't recognized before. The breaking point, I realized, wasn't a failure. It was a threshold, a test of endurance, a reminder that even when the world shifts beneath you, even when those closest to you misunderstand or falter, you have the capacity to endure, to adapt, to grow. The storm doesn't decide who survives. How you navigate it does. And for the first time since everything began, I believed I could navigate it without losing myself entirely. Because survival isn't just about living. It's about reclaiming yourself in the midst of chaos. And in that reclaiming, in the face of misunderstanding and betrayal, I felt something undeniable. I was not broken. Not yet. Not ever. It started with a plan that had been simmering in the shadows of my mind for weeks. Every detail I had observed, every weakness I had cataloged, every small injustice he had sown into my life, everything was accounted for. And now, the moment had arrived. The moment where observation became action, where strategy collided with emotion, and where the tipping scale of everything he had taken began to shift. I watched him carefully, as I always had. But this time it was different. He was vulnerable without knowing it, blinded by his own arrogance, his sense of untouchable charm, and the minor rival he had brought into the mix, a shadowy figure who thought they could manipulate outcomes to their advantage, made the path even more complicated, but also more precise. I moved quietly, deliberately, letting the pieces fall into place without forcing them. Every interaction, every revealed secret, every carefully timed disclosure was a ripple that grew into waves, and I was at the center of them, steady and unwavering. There is a peculiar sensation in executing a plan you've crafted not from cruelty, but from a demand for justice. It is intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Every heartbeat feels amplified, every breath sharp, as if the air itself anticipates what is about to unfold. I feel the pull of triumph, the subtle rush of satisfaction at seeing the first cracks form in his carefully maintained life. And yet, even as I watch the consequences unfold, I can't escape the whisper of doubt. How much of me am I leaving behind in this process? How much of my own morality, my own integrity, do I risk sacrificing for the sake of retribution? His world begins to unravel in ways he could never predict. Small revelations grow, like fires catching in dry grass, until everything he assumed was untouchable starts to collapse. The minor antagonist, the rival, tries to intervene, unaware that their own actions only accelerate the truth. And I feel a flicker of something unexpected, a strange mix of fear and clarity, as I realize that control is never absolute, even for me. Even the most careful execution carries unpredictability. And in that uncertainty, I find a reflection of all the pain I've carried, the betrayal, the lies, the public exposure, and the personal losses that had once threatened to consume me. Through it all, my supportive friend is there, not directing, not judging, but simply present. Their presence is a tether, grounding me in the moments when the chaos of unfolding events threatens to pull me into a spiral of overreach or regret. They remind me, silently, that power without reflection is dangerous, that revenge can satisfy temporarily, but it can also leave a scar deeper than any betrayal I have endured. And I hear that truth, even as I continue to act, even as I watch karma, or justice, begin to assert itself in ways that feel immediate, inevitable, and precise. There's an almost cinematic tension in watching him stumble, seeing his arrogance falter, watching the rival's interference backfire in ways that leave him exposed. It isn't joy that I feel, it is recognition. Recognition that the scales, which had long been tilted in his favor, are finally adjusting. That what was taken, what was broken, is no longer irretrievable. And yet, within that recognition, there is a moral weight I hadn't anticipated. Every step I take in this reclamation, every move that exposes truth, carries with it the reminder that I am not untouched by my own methods. The satisfaction is intertwined with reflection. How much do I allow this revenge to define me? How far do I permit my pain to dictate action before it starts shaping the person I become? I confront him not with fury, but with precision. Each revelation lands with clarity. Each interaction strips away the facades he had relied upon. He stumbles, disoriented, unprepared for the calculated calm I bring. And I notice something I hadn't expected. The subtle tremor in his posture, the hesitation, the realization that he had underestimated me entirely. That is the moment the scale tips. Not in a grand gesture, not in spectacle, but in the quiet, undeniable assertion of a person reclaiming what was theirs. And yet, even in victory, I feel the moral echoes. The minor antagonist, the rival who had complicated my plan, still exists in this story, still reminds me that consequences ripple unpredictably. My friend's steady presence reminds me that emotional survival isn't measured by triumph alone, but by the ability to remain intact amidst upheaval. The satisfaction I feel is tempered by reflection, by awareness that the cost of revenge is not only to the person who wronged me, but potentially to the self I am trying to preserve. By the time the dust begins to settle, I feel both exhausted and alive. The tipping scale has done its work. Karma, or justice, or whatever force balances the universe, has asserted itself. He is no longer untouchable. Lies are exposed. The minor antagonist's interference only serves to highlight the inevitability of truth. And I realize, finally, that the power I hold isn't just in the act of revenge. It is in understanding my limits, in seeing clearly where action intersects with conscience, and in acknowledging the emotional cost of reclaiming what is rightfully mine. I stand there, watching the aftermath, and understand something profound. Justice can shake the world, but it does not define it entirely. Revenge can satisfy the mind, but the heart demands reflection. And in that space, I feel the quiet strength I had been seeking all along. Not the vindictive satisfaction I imagined, not the hollow triumph of seeing him falter, but the deeper, steadier truth. I am awake. I am aware. I'm still whole. And that, finally, is the tipping point that matters most. I stand across from him one last time, and there's nothing left to prove. No words rehearsed, no strategies to execute, no hidden truths to expose. I look at him, not with the heat of anger, not with the sharp edge of revenge, but with clarity. The years of pain, the sleepless nights, the endless spirals of doubt and fury, they have distilled into something I never expected: quiet strength. A strength that doesn't need recognition, that doesn't demand restitution, that doesn't require him to crumble for me to rise. He looks back at me, and I see it: hesitation, a tremor in the confidence he wore like armor for so long. For the first time, he's unsure. The lies he spun, the charm he relied upon, the arrogance that made him untouchable, all of it falters under the weight of my presence. But I don't savor it. I don't relish the shift. I only notice it because I am not here to punish him. I am here to claim my own truth, to finally stand unburdened by the shadows he left behind. It's strange, this feeling. The urge for revenge, the obsession with fairness, the desire to see him falter. They still whisper in the corners of my mind. But I don't feed them. I let them exist, acknowledged but inert. I realize now that healing isn't a passive act. It isn't forgetting. It isn't pretending the betrayal didn't happen. Healing is conscious. It's choosing to step forward, even when the wounds are visible, even when the temptation to lash back is strong. Healing is taking your own life back from the chaos someone else created and refusing to let them live inside your story any longer. I think of all the moments that brought me here: the confrontation, the chaos, the breaking points, the calculated moves. Each one carved a piece of me into something sharper, stronger, more aware. Each moment taught me that power is not in vengeance, but in self-possession. And as I face him now, I feel that power in a way that is tangible, yet serene. He doesn't know how to measure it, because he never learned how to look inward. He only understood control, appearances, manipulation. And those tools, which once terrified me, now feel irrelevant. He tries to speak, to explain, to justify, but I listen without judgment. Not because I forgive him, at least not yet, but because I have no need to interrupt his narrative. His excuses are empty, echoing against the walls of my awareness, revealing more about him than any plan I could have executed. And as he falters, as the cracks in his armor deepen, I notice a subtle shift in myself, a lightness almost imperceptible that grows with each heartbeat. For the first time in months, I feel unchained, not free from the memory, but free from its power over me. I speak then, softly but firmly, not to wound, not to punish, not to teach, but to mark the truth I have claimed for myself. My words are not rhetorical, they are lived. I'm not defined by what you took. I'm not defined by the chaos you created, and I will not let it control the life I still have. There is no tremor, no plea, no demand. Just fact, undeniable and unwavering. And in that moment, I understand the final quiet justice. He begins to feel the consequences, not because I inflicted them, but because the weight of his own choices is finally visible, undeniable, reflected in the calm, deliberate presence of the person he thought he could never affect. I step back, and a strange calm settles over me. The anger has dissipated. The desire for revenge has faded to a faint echo. All that remains is awareness. Awareness of my resilience, my growth, my ability to endure, adapt, and emerge whole. I realized that the journey was never about making him suffer. It was about refusing to allow his actions to define me. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt and fear, they were not wasted. They were the raw material from which I forged a new understanding of myself, a new respect for my own boundaries, and a new clarity about what I will accept from the world and from people who enter it. I closed the chapter not with spectacle, not with dramatic confrontation, but with quiet resolution. I do not look back. I do not linger. He remains where he is, humbled, shaken, but it no longer matters. I carry only what belongs to me. My clarity, my strength, and the realization that true power is not in vengeance, but in the deliberate, conscious choice to move forward. And as I walk away, I feel something deeper than relief. I feel grounded. I feel awake. I feel myself, whole, unbroken, and unshakable. The storm has passed, but the truth remains. I faced it, I endured it, and I claimed the one thing that could never be taken from me, my own life, fully and without apology. I walk forward, not running, not fleeing, but deliberately, as if every step carries the weight of what I've endured and the promise of what I will become. The past is behind me, not erased, not forgotten, but settled into a place where it no longer dictates my life. I feel the subtle lift in my chest, the steadiness in my stride, the quiet certainty that I am reclaiming space that is mine alone. Every betrayal, every loss, every sleepless night has built me into someone stronger, someone awake, someone unafraid to face the world on my own terms. I pass familiar places, echoes of what once was, memories stitched into walls and streets. The rest stop where it all began. The quiet corners where I cried alone. The spaces where I once measured my worth by someone else's decisions. And I feel something shift in me, something heavy lifting, something expansive. I no longer define myself by his absence or by the scars he left. I define myself by the choices I am making now. To stand tall, to claim my life, to embrace the person I am becoming. I see my closest friend in the distance, the one who stayed through every storm, whose presence became an anchor when I felt adrift. They smile, not with pity, not with admiration, but with quiet acknowledgement. They see me as I am, transformed, yet grounded. I nod, and the simple exchange carries more weight than words ever could, because they've witnessed every fracture, every fear, every step toward reclamation, and still, they see the whole person, unbroken. Family, too, comes into focus. The misunderstandings, the accusations, the tension, they no longer sting the way they did. Distance, perspective, and time have allowed clarity to settle. The conversations that once felt impossible now feel like bridges, not walls. I don't pretend that everything is perfect, that all the hurt has dissolved. I only accept that my life doesn't need validation from anyone who once doubted my strength. I carry forward, independent, intact, and aware of my own value. I think of him, the man whose betrayal began this journey, the antagonist whose lies threatened to eclipse my sense of self. He is still out there, living in the consequences of his choices. I do not need to intervene. I do not need to witness every unraveling, every stumble, every truth revealed in its own time. That part of the story is his. My part is here in the life I am building, in the clarity I have earned, in the boundaries I now hold firmly. Karma, justice, truth, they operate independently, and I no longer feel responsible for meting them out. I'm only responsible for myself. And yet, as I look ahead, I sense something subtle, someone new, someone whose presence hints at possibilities I haven't considered, someone who exists in the space I am finally ready to inhabit without the shadows of the past weighing me down. There is curiosity, not attachment, opportunity, not expectation, a quiet suggestion that life continues to offer chances, but only if I remain open, vigilant, and unafraid to embrace them. The transformation isn't flashy. There are no dramatic gestures, no grand proclamations. It is quiet, steady, insistent. It is reflected in the way I carry myself, in the steadiness of my thoughts, in the deliberate care I take with the life I am reclaiming. Independence is no longer an abstract idea. Self-respect is no longer a phrase I repeat to convince myself I am worthy. Both exist tangibly in the choices I make every day, in the way I interact with the world, in the resilience I feel coursing through me. I pass echoes of the past, the moments of betrayal, the confrontations, the heartbreak, and instead of pain, I feel perspective. They are part of my history, yes, but they are no longer the authors of my story. I am. Every decision from this moment forward is mine, and in that ownership, I find a freedom more profound than I have ever known. Freedom from fear, freedom from the need to control others, freedom from the ghosts that once haunted every corner of my mind. I pause briefly, taking a deep breath, letting the enormity of what I've survived settle into my bones. The storm that once threatened to consume me is now a memory, a reference point, a testament to the resilience I never fully acknowledged until now. I realize that rising strong is not a destination. It is a continuous choice, a commitment to live deliberately, to protect my boundaries, to nurture the parts of myself that were once ignored or discarded. And as I step forward once more, the city, the streets, the world itself feels alive in a way it hasn't before. I am awake to possibility, unburdened by the weight of someone else's choices, and fully present to the life I am building with my own hands, my own decisions, my own courage. The past no longer has the power to define me. The future is unwritten, vast, and waiting, and I am ready to meet it, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with the full force of a woman who has survived, endured, and risen strong. Because the truth I have learned, finally, is this: strength is not about defeating others. It is about reclaiming yourself. Healing is not about erasing pain. It is about choosing life anyway. And rising strong is not about perfection. It is about standing fully, wholly, and unapologetically in the life that is yours to live.